Hey there. If you're watching this, you might have recently settled your personal injury case or are getting ready to. One question I get sometimes from my clients who are at this stage of their case is, hey, do I have to worry about Uncle Sam taking some of my settlement money? The short answer is no. Personal injury settlements in most cases are not taxable. This is because the United States Tax Code specifically excludes any money you receive on account of physical injury or physical sickness from the income that you're required to report on your tax return. And this makes sense if you think about it, because a personal injury settlement is not a windfall or extra income to someone who suffered the injury. The settlement money is intended to compensate you for things that were taken from you, such as the money that you had to use to pay for medical expenses, the wages and earnings that you didn't receive while you were hurt, and the good health and quality of life you lost because of your injuries. So this is good news. Uncle Sam generally keeps his hands off settlements like this. But if you were listening carefully, you probably heard me say at the beginning that personal injury settlements are not taxable in most cases. But most does not mean all, right? So let's talk about some of the most common situations when personal injury settlements might be taxable. The first situation where you might have to claim some or all of your settlement money is if you took a deduction for medical expenses in prior tax years. If you deducted medical bills related to your injuries in prior tax years and then got reimbursed for those medical bills in your settlement, you may need to include the amount of those medical bills as income in the same tax year that you receive your settlement. Another situation where a settlement might create taxable income is if it includes punitive damages. I don't see this come up in a lot of personal injury cases. It's most likely to come up if you take your case to trial and you get a jury verdict that includes an award of punitive damages. Then, if the defendant settles with you and pays the judgment, the amount that you were awarded in punitive damages is going to be included in your income. That's because the law only allows you to exclude damages that you receive to compensate you for your physical injuries. Punitive damages are different. They're not meant to compensate you. They're meant to punish the defendant for its egregious behavior and send the message to others that similar behavior won't be tolerated. Because punitive damages don't compensate you for something that was taken from you on account of your physical injuries, Uncle Sam's going to want to get a piece of that pie. Another situation where you might have to claim some of your personal injury settlement as income is when your settlement agreement includes a confidentiality provision. Sometimes defendants or their insurance companies will condition the settlement on you agreeing not to disclose the settlement to other people. They want to keep their legal disputes in the dark so nobody finds out what they've been up to. The problem is, hush money is not the same as injury compensation. Courts have found that money received for an agreement to keep a personal injury settlement confidential is taxable. That can make things tricky when your settlement agreement contains a confidentiality provision. Now, there are several ways that we can deal with this. The easiest is to simply not agree to confidentiality. But sometimes people are okay with confidentiality, assuming the defendant or the insurance company is willing to pay enough to get it. In that situation, some portion of the settlement might need to be allocated to confidentiality and the rest to your personal injuries. This allocation should be spelled out in your settlement agreement and should reflect the true nature of the settlement and the negotiations between the parties. You don't want to try to get cute about it and allocate some nominal amount like $1 to the confidentiality piece of the settlement so you only have to pay taxes on $1 because the IRS might look at it and disagree with you. A cameraman found this out the hard way when he settled a personal injury case with Rodman. After Rodman kicked the cameraman in the groin, the cameraman got some minor medical treatment, and then Rodman ended up settling with the cameraman for $200,000. Ordinarily, none of that would be taxed because it was for physical injuries, but the settlement agreement contained a confidentiality provision and did not allocate any of the settlement money to the confidentiality agreement, so the cameraman tried to exclude the full $200,000 from his income. When the tax courts took a look at it, they found the main reason for the settlement was to compensate the cameraman for his injuries, but they also found that the confidentiality provision was a key feature of the settlement. So some of the settlement should have been allocated to the confidentiality piece and included in the cameraman's income. Based on how important the confidentiality provision was to the settlement under the facts of that case, the court allocated 40% of the settlement amount to the confidentiality agreement. That means the cameraman got to exclude 60% of the settlement, or $120,000 from his income, but had to pay taxes on the remaining $80,000. Now, I don't want you to get worried and think that the Rodman case means that 40% of all personal injury settlements that contain a confidentiality provision need to be included as income. That outcome was based on the specific facts of that case where the cameraman's injuries were relatively minor and the confidentiality obligations were a major part of the settlement. If we're handling your injury case, you can rest assured that we will talk to you about the implications of any confidentiality provision in your settlement agreement and strategize to minimize your tax liability. Another situation where you might have to worry about taxes is if you receive pre-judgment or post-judgment interest as part of your personal injury case. There are court decisions that have held that interest awarded in personal injury cases should be included in income, but this rarely comes up because most settlements do not include payment for this kind of interest. This situation is most likely to come up if your case goes to trial and a judge or a jury awards you pre-judgment or post-judgment interest. If that happens, you may owe taxes on the interest piece of your award. The other thing I want to mention here is that so far we've only been talking about taxes at the federal level, but we all know that there are state and local taxes to worry about as well. Now, the states where I'm licensed generally treat personal injury settlements the same way as federal law, but that's something you'll need to verify when you file your state and local tax returns. The last thing I want to leave you with is that while I try to do my best to help clients understand the tax issues that can come up in a settlement situation, I'm not a tax attorney or a CPA, so you should really have a tax expert help you file your tax returns to make sure any taxable part of your personal injury settlement is properly reported as income. If you want to do any further reading on this, I'll leave some links to the relevant tax statutes and the IRS publications that address this topic below. And if you worked with us on a case and your tax professional has any questions, we're happy to talk to your tax person and answer any questions about your case or your settlement to make sure that your taxes get done right. I hope this has been helpful. If you want to talk to me about an injury case, here's my contact information. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.